Christianity and the Beatnik. I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. Jack Kerouac, the man who gave Beatniks their name, used these three phrases to briefly sum up the beat philosophy. Well, you're probably asking yourself, is this guy a Beatnik? And the answer is no, I'm not a Beatnik. I'm a Christian full of questions about the Beatnik movement. I mean, lately it's been boom time for the beats, publicity in magazines, newspapers, on television, until I finally begin asking myself questions. Questions like, what is a Beatnik? What do they stand for? Is it a religious or an anti-religious movement? As a Christian, should I be for them or against them? You'll probably ask yourself some of these same questions. Well, I got so curious about this subject that I had to find some answers to these questions, and to find answers, I read some of the Beatnik literature until it got so vulgar I couldn't take it anymore. I read what had been written about them. I talked firsthand with some of the clan, even talked to a sociologist on the subject. Okay, so what is a Beatnik? Well, there are many views and theories existing as to exactly what is a Beatnik. Let's look at a couple of them. Now, some people think of a Beatnik as physical beatness. I mean, being physically tired. You know, a fellow works all day, he comes in from the field and he says, man, I'm beat. Well, if this theory isn't true, and it isn't, how in the world do you explain the tired, grotesque, nonchalant positions that these people assume? Another theory has it that if you dress like a Beatnik, you are a Beatnik. Now, we've all seen pictures of these characters. Most of the time, their hair is never combed, or else they wear a beret. Beards are common, sweatshirts are worn quite often. Any kind of old garb is fine. The girls have long, stringy hair, but assuming the clothes and the pose of a Beatnik does not make me one. Actually, the clothes and the physical posture of a Beatnik are a result of a group of ideas, or, as the psychologist would say, a complex of attitudes. The Beatnik believes that man faces a futile existence. Now, I mean, things are really black. This is true for several reasons. One of the most important is that man never gets to know himself. I, as an individual, never get to know who I am or what I'm really like. The Beatnik says that we never get to know ourselves because we're always trying to be somebody else. We want to be well-adjusted, we want to be popular, we want to have a large circle of friends, and of course, we want to belong to the best bridge club in town, and to do all these things, we adjust ourselves to be the way we think other people want us to be. Well, so far that probably sounds like so much double talk, but it's just another way of saying that we're all a bunch of conformists. There are people who try to explain away our problems with words. They put down in words who we are, what we're doing here, our purpose in life. Others come up with slogans like one world, today for tomorrow, and science is a wonderful thing. Now, these are supposed to give us hope and courage for the future. But the Beatnik says, he rejects all this. He says these are false structures that man has devised, which instead of saving him, acts as one huge whirlpool dragging him down to destruction, down to one great big H-bomb blast. Kaboom. American culture, then, reflects the life the Beatnik wants to reject. It's the life that he wants to turn his back to. The life of a square, a life that he feels is getting nobody nowhere. A life of conformity where everybody wants to be the man in the gray flannel suit with a nice home in the suburbs, a station wagon, TV, 3 or 4 kids, and lots of security. Well, this is the life the Beatnik wants to reject. He says, don't give me all that jazz, man. We've been living in that baloney for centuries, and we're worse off now than we ever were. I'm interested in now and me. Well, that briefly outlines what a beatnik believes or doesn't believe. It also pretty much tells you what a square is. To a high school student, a square is a person who doesn't dig rock and roll music. To a beatnik, a square is you and me, the masses, the average man, the conformist. Now, you're probably asking yourself, does a beatnik get to know himself? I mean, does he get to know himself any better than we're supposed to know ourselves? He says he does. In fact, he's worked out quite a system for getting to know himself. You've heard the expression kicks. Well, experiencing kicks is the way a beatnik gets to know himself. What are kicks? Well, kicks are any kind of strange, unusual, direct experience. The crazier the experience, the better chance the beatnik has of understanding himself as an individual and knowing who he is. Now, these crazy experiences are kicks. And kicks can range anywhere from driving a car 75 miles an hour in a 25-mile speed zone to taking dope to sexual promiscuity. Any way of grasping reality. In other words, you can't talk about life, you've got to experience it. Well, this briefly gives us a clue as to the thinking that goes on in a beatnik's mind. It answers the questions as to why he dresses differently, tells us why he never combs his hair, why obscene language is smart. Of course, a beatnik never plans on having a family, because having a family would tie you to a system, and being tied to a system is a trap suited only to a square. The beat movement, then, is an outcry against today's culture, and I think they've got some pretty justifiable claims. The trouble with a beatnik is that once he tells you all the faults of our culture, he shrugs his shoulders and then ambles off looking for more kicks. Now, I think there's plenty of things wrong with life in the 20th century, but the beatniks aren't offering any solutions to the problem. Christianity is. It's kind of interesting to compare some of the ideas and theories of the Christian and the beatnik. For instance, the beatnik doesn't believe in God as a superior being. I mean, a God in heaven ruling over us all, they just don't buy this. The only God they believe in is the possibility of finding a God within themselves. Well, another point, a beatnik studies himself to find reality, whatever that is. He's always looking for more kicks to better understand himself. A Christian, on the other hand, walks with God and asks God's guidance in knowing himself and understanding life and the everyday problems of living. And we know we'll never understand everything while we remain on this earth, but someday he will give us the whole scoop, give us answers as to why this or that happened. And when that day comes, it's going to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Everything will make sense. One thing's for certain, kicks aren't the answer. You don't dive headfirst into sin and come out knowing who the real you is. If anything, you destroy everything you're looking for. The beatnik has a good point with this bit on conformity. I definitely believe that following the crowd, doing everything they do, is wrong. I believe in nonconformity, but the Christians' type of nonconformity, not the beatniks. Now, that may sound a little bit odd, but anybody who has come to the point where they realize that they're a sinner without hope, who ask God to come into their lives and cleanse them of this sin, anybody who wants Christ to be their Savior, anyone who lives a Christian life, this person is a nonconformist. But this so-called nonconformity is the secret to Christianity. One of the main premises the beatnik stands on is that mankind faces a futile existence. A life is some kind of a balancing act on the verge of toppling to the ground. Now, here again, the Christian looks at things in an entirely different light. We say we have a future, but more than just a future, we have an eternal future. Now, this hinges on one thing, and of course that thing is you. You have to say, yes, I want this future. God has given us some wonderful promises to hang on to, promises that give us an assurance of this eternal future. In John 3:16, for instance, we read, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. A little farther on in John 5:24, we read this in the Bible, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that hears my word and believes on him that sent me has everlasting life, and shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death to life." Now compare this with "I don't know," "I don't care," and "it doesn't make any difference." I'll tell you frankly, this summation of the beat philosophy leaves me just a little bit cold. Well, in summing this up, it's my feeling that if being tied to a system, God's system, makes me a square, then I'm glad I'm a square. Being tied, shackled, and bound to God is the only way to experience true freedom of spirit and mind. And I hope that you have experienced that freedom.